Hello everyone, recently I've been having a lot of fun playing with this thing. It's a visualization of each character across all episodes in a One Piece anime. A dot means that a character appears in that episode, no dot means that they don't. I call it the character raster, and I talked about it in detail in my previous video on this channel, but really all it is a cool way to visualize the differences between different shows. Like, take a look at Jojo. Even if you know nothing about either of the two shows, just by looking at the Jojo character raster, you can see that it's structured very differently to One Piece. But that's also kind of the problem. It's just a visual. I want something quantitative, like a number or a set of numbers that I can point to and be like, okay, Jojo is different from One Piece because X is greater than Y. And spoiler alert, I don't have a concrete method just yet, but in trying to think about this problem, I found something interesting. And given all of you seem to enjoy this data-driven analysis of a show, I thought I'd share. It has to do with adding up dots across the character raster. For example, if we add up all the characters going vertically, we get a graph that shows us the number of unique characters in a given episode. And here I've also colored them by the major arcs. Now, I think there's some interesting things to say here, but what I actually want to talk about is what happens if we add the dots horizontally. Now, we get a graph that shows us the number of times a character appeared in the show. Here's a list showing the characters with most appearances in order. One minor point of interest is that Usopp is the only Straw Hat who ranks lower than the chronological order in which the character first appeared in the show. That's probably because during the Enies Lobby arc, Usopp has gone and a new character called Soja King briefly and temporarily joins the Straw Hats. Maybe questionable to have a random character just pop into the show all of a sudden and then leave again, but I guess that's just one of those lovable quirks of One Piece. The character that appears the most often is Luffy, naturally at 972 episodes, and the non-main Straw Hat character that appears the most often is Kinemon with 223 episodes. Oh, and because I got questions about it last time, yes, Panda Man is here, and he apparently appears 68 times. And on its own, that's interesting, but not particularly surprising or informative in my opinion. Instead of looking at characters individually, I wanted to look at how character appearances are distributed. For example, there are 327 characters that appear only once. 157 characters appear twice, 96 appear 3 times, and while I could keep going quoting numbers at you for the next hour, I've instead made a graph, which admittedly is not very helpful as is. But if we search it to be in log scale, we'll see the patterns a bit better. Now, this is really important, so I want to make it clear, these dots don't represent characters. They represent the number of characters who appeared X amount of times. So here are the numbers I just quoted. 327 characters appeared once, that's 1 dot. 157 characters appeared twice, 96 appear 3 times, and so on and so on. What this is implicitly trying to do is give us a probability of the number of times a character appears. However, I'm still not a huge fan of this graph because unintuitively, it doesn't really work so well for characters that appear often. It makes sense that the larger the number, the smaller the probability. Only one character appears 972 times, so it gets a small probability. Fine. But only one character appears 95 times, Kozuki Oden, and by this graph, it has the same exact probability as 972. In fact, the first 3-digit number that has 2 characters appearing that many times, hopefully that makes sense, is 168 with Charlotte Linlin and Trafalgar Law. But even below that, we won't get another for a while with Eustace Kid and Raizo coming in at 110. Essentially, all this means is that this really isn't a good way of representing our data. But it is close. A common way to fix that is to change the question just a little bit. Instead of asking how many times a character appears once, we ask how many characters appear once or more, or 95 times or more, or whatever number we want. And just so we can compare amongst different series, it does also help to write that as a fraction. This is technically called the cumulative distribution function, or CDF, and this is what it looks like for One Piece. So how many characters appear once or more? Well, that's all of them, so it gets a 1. How many characters appear 11 times or more? Well, that's actually close to 50%. So for a given character, there is only a 50% chance that they will appear in over 11 episodes. Since One Piece is 1,100 episodes at the time of when I gathered this data, another way to say that would be that 50% of characters will not appear in more than 1% of the show, which I think is an interesting way of putting it. Ultimately though, what this is saying is that we have a lot of characters that appear rarely, but we have a few characters that appear often. And that seems like a lot of effort to get to something so obvious, but that's not the cool thing that I wanted to talk about. The cool part is what happens when we compare to other anime. Because yeah, of course there would be a lot of characters that don't appear a lot and a few characters that appear often, but that on its own doesn't say anything about how this graph should look other than that it should go downwards. So I thought, let's see what happens if we plot Jojo. It goes down like expected, but it looks different, which totally makes sense. Jojo is a very different show, which we saw in the raster. Unlike One Piece, Jojo is more of a villain of the week type show, meaning that for the most part, characters either appear a lot or they appear only once. There isn't really a lot of middle ground, and the sharper drop is reflecting that, and I think all of this checks out. But what about all the other anime I had access to? Bleach, Naruto, Dragonball, and recently I added Pokemon as well. Again, what I was expecting to see was a downward trend, but a graph that looked different to the ones that we already had. That's what I was expecting, but that's not really what I got. Instead, they all seem to be more or less following One Piece. And that I was not expecting. Now, okay, I'll admit there's some wiggle room here. They aren't following One Piece perfectly. But I mean, to me, they seem more similar than not, especially when we compare it with Jojo. Now, I don't know if there's some sort of underlying reason for this or if it's just a coincidence. Obviously, there's some sampling bias in that these shows are all long-running manga, and maybe that's what long-running manga kind of trend towards. Like, maybe this distribution of character appearances strikes a perfect ratio that makes the world feel fleshed out, while also allowing us to focus on a core group of main characters. Or maybe the half-hour-ish format of anime imposes this type of structure for continuously running plotlines. Again, I don't really have any proof that there's something deeper going on here, I just thought you anime stats nerds would enjoy it. Though, going back to what I said, these anime don't follow One Piece perfectly. Some follow better than others, and actually, there is a way that we can quantify that numerically. And I think I have some interesting results there, but I think I'll hold that off for another video. Partially because this video is long enough for the second channel, but also because I want to test a hypothesis that will require getting more anime. So if you have some suggestions for longish running anime, let me know. Of course, like I said at the start, what I'm primarily looking for is ways to quantify the differences between anime, and while I'm excited that we found this one for Jojo, it suggests that the other ones are all kind of the same, so obviously not ideal. Though, to be fair, I do already kind of have something like that. In the main channel video, I showed how you can transform the character raster into a network and how we can use simple tools from network theory to compare those networks. Like how the blockiness of Jojo manifests into this compartmentalized network and how we can actually put a number to that compartmentalization. And I thought that was neat, and if you enjoyed this video, maybe you'll enjoy that one. But I still think it'd be nice if we could get that information directly from the character raster itself. Of course, if I find something cool, I'll make a follow-up on this. One thing I was kind of thinking about was talking about the Pokemon character raster. That one is kind of interesting on its own, especially because it's as big as the One Piece raster, but it's very, very different. Let me know if you'd be interested in that. Anyways, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed. See you whenever I see you, I guess.